Hello and welcome to a Team Moray Robotics event recap. On July 26th, my dad and I competed with the multi-bot combat robot Slicepost 31 at Hive Hysteria. Hive Hysteria is an event run by the Honeycracked team in Maryland, and this was an interesting change in the kinds of events I usually compete at. Hive Hysteria was only running 3-pound and 12-pound robots, and I only have 1-pound plastic and full combat bots, so if I wanted to compete I would have to build a new robot to enter one of the two weight classes. I had plans to build an actual 3-pound beetle weight, but I didn't have time before this event, so I decided to run 2 overweight plastic ants as a 3-pound multi-bot. Slicepost 31 is made up of my plastic ant lifter Outpost 31, which had some success at the previous macro event, and Sliceserve, my dad's plastic ant lifter. At Hive Hysteria, even weight multi-bots got a 1-pound weight bonus, so each robot could weigh 2 pounds each. With a lot of weight to fill before we were even with our competitors, I designed metal forks and metal top plates for the bots. The typical lifters probably wouldn't do much against beetles, so I designed a new weapon. It went through a few iterations though. Eventually, I landed on this thing. I had 2 small blades from my full combat ant Moray that I don't use anymore, and I screwed them onto a TPU arm to make a sort of hammer that's much more of an aggressive tapper. And when I say aggressive, I mean really aggressive. They might be kind of useless, but they were really fun to play around with in testing. It's funny how multiple people thought Slicepost 31 was a hammer saw multi-bot, when in reality they're severely overestimating how good they actually are. Even with all the metal, both robots combined were not only under the 4-pound limit, but they were also under the usual 3 pounds. It was pretty obvious that we wouldn't be very competitive, but this was just kind of for fun before I make a real beetle. Hive Hysteria ran a very unique system of fights where each competitor got 3 chips at the start of the event, and you got to pick who you wanted to fight and when you wanted to fight. If you lose a fight, you give your opponent your chip, and the robots with the most chips get put into a small bracket at the end to decide the overall winner of the event. The first robot we fought was a robot that's fought at NHRL before called Silencer. Silencer is a hammer saw with 3 forks on the front, and I thought it would be a fun first fight for Slicepost 31 because it probably wasn't the most destructive robot there, as it's more of a control bot with a damaging weapon. Though I guess anyone looked like more of a fair fight because we were sitting next to Impact in the pits. When the fight starts, I outreach Silencer and gain control while my dad comes in for a perfectly executed attack on the backside. We separate, and then both robots continue to control Silencer before his blade flips Sliceserve over in the corner. He lands more hits on Sliceserve, and then Outpost 31 reenacts the defibrillator scene from The Thing as I bring the arm down into Silencer's disc, which rips the metal head off. And I love how it lands right in front of me. Even without a head, we double pin our opponent and Sliceserve starts tapping him. Then Sliceserve grabs him with his full arm, and I start slapping his backside with my TPU stub. Sliceserve gets flipped again, but we get another double pin. Then Sliceserve does some weird weapon stuff before I decide to send my half an arm straight into Silencer's disc, which splits it down the middle and pulls the servo out of the robot. Sliceserve gets flipped again and Silencer digs its spinning disc deep into its backside. Outpost 31's front end is now all warped from the servo bending the chassis, but my dad tees up Silencer so I can come in from the back. We actually do an alright job of controlling him, and then we get another pin where Sliceserve taps him very aggressively while I try to do something with what's left of my weapon. Silencer reverses a pin on us and then pins both of us against the wall at once. Here you can see the advantage of having a multi-bot as Outpost 31 gets pinned and Sliceserve comes in from the side. Outpost gets shoved into the wall and Sliceserve momentarily forgets who it's fighting. My half lifter thing helps right Sliceserve, and then Silencer gets more control and swings the arm, but it seems like the spinner of its hammer saw isn't working anymore, which could be big for our chances of winning the fight. Unfortunately, Outpost 31 lost its left side of drive at some point. Sliceserve gets another very good pin, and then the fight goes to the judges. Overall, I think Slicepost 31 did a very good job considering the disadvantages, but Silencer ended up winning the judges' decision. I'm not entirely sure I agree with the decision, but it was definitely close. I'm sure it didn't help that Outpost 31 looked like this by the end. The servo was okay and it still worked fine, but obviously the arm was cut in half and there was a chunk taken out of the titanium blade. I gave half the arm to Silencer's builder. One of the steel forks on Outpost 31 was bent as well. I don't know why the drive died though. Slice serve might have still worked by the end of the fight, but it also looked like this. If Silencer cut any deeper, some of those wires definitely would have gotten hit. We taped it up for the next fight and it was good to go. The right side fork was torn up and the bottom has 2 slices in it that didn't make it all the way through the chassis. The next robot we decided to fight was Banana Peeler, a robot run by Thomas from Rabid. I was supposed to fight a banana robot at an earlier macro event, but the fight ended up not happening, so this is almost a delayed rematch. Banana Peeler is a 2-wheel drive egg beater, which would be a very good test to see how Slicer 31 does against a very meta sort of robot. I was not expecting to win this at all, but I thought maybe we could do alright if we kept the forks pointed at his drum the whole time. This fight was going to be in the 12-pound arena. When the fight starts, I just barely get away from Slicer and deflect a hit from Banana Peeler. Outpost 31 gets flipped, and Banana Peeler bounces off Slicer's forks before flipping it and hitting it again. Slicer takes a hit, but both robots end up stuck in the corner. I come in for a pin and Banana Peeler gyro flips away off the forks. Outpost 31 backs into Banana Peeler, and his egg beater spins down on my wheel, which sends him flipping through the air, but also rips the whole wheel and shaft off the motor. I don't know what we're doing here. Slicer almost gets thrown out of the arena, but Banana Peeler gets caught on the wall for a bit. A hit to the side of Outpost 31's forks tears that whole side of armor mostly off and messes up the driving pretty bad. Slicer kinda hangs out for a while Banana Peeler lands another hit. Slicer's forks hold up well to a hit, and then it gets flipped, but Banana Peeler's weapon dies for some reason. This was funny because before the fight, Thomas told us that he's never lost the weapon belt before, even though the pulley has been hit. I guess we did something here. He uses his weight class appropriate drive system to push Slicer across the arena, which throws it into the moat around the side of the box. This thing isn't going to put up much of a fight, so Banana Peeler goes straight at it and pins me. I try to tap him, but just barely can't reach. The drive dies for reasons, and I get counted out. Well, that went about as well as that game of darts. I can't say I'm too surprised with how that went. Outpost 31 lost a motor shaft and had minimal damage done to its wheel guard. The screws pulled out on one side of the fork mounts, and the prongs on some of the forks were curled back. Slicer at least took no damage. With this loss, we only had one chip left and one more chance to fight, so I decided to fight maybe the most ridiculous robot in the room. Breakneck Nyan is a bristlebot horizontal spinner built by Keziah Sky from Chainsaw Kitty. I think Nyan gets a weight bonus for having unconventional locomotion because it doesn't have wheels, so I'm pretty sure it weighs about 4 pounds. Nyan is a huge dual-disc horizontal spinner that moves by spinning its weapon up and vibrating across the floor. I knew there was very little chance at this point of actually winning, so I just hoped this would be entertaining. Since we had so much weight to work with, I had weight to put a massive steel wedge on the front of Outpost 31 that was so heavy that it bent the entire front of the robot down when I picked it up. Slicer had some TPU comb forks too. When the fight starts, I go straight at Breakneck Nyan with my wedge, and half the wedge mount pops out, and somehow the entire servo with the arm attached comes flying out of the robot in midair. This was definitely part of my strategy going in. With my new servo tail, I drive at Nyan again, which throws Outpost across the box, but also sends Nyan into the air, where she comes down on top of Slicer, throwing both robots again. Slicer forgets who it's fighting again, and then Outpost 31 gets swatted away. Then Breakneck throws itself around a few times before Slicer somehow managed to get her against the wall and lands one aggressive tap. I get under Nyan and get launched away again. Another smaller hit occurs, and then Nyan comes down vertically on top of Outpost 31, ripping into its top plate and severing the servo completely. Nyan slowly makes its way toward Outpost 31, and a hit to the wedge leaves it stuck on the wall. Slicer's fork gets ripped off, and then if you slow down the footage, you can see that Slicer actually brings the arm down into Nyan's spinner, which miraculously doesn't end in complete disaster somehow. Then a whole side of cone forks gets ripped completely off. After slowly vibrating over, Nyan Nyan approaches the half-functional slice serve, which just backs straight into the spinner and gets its wheel ripped off. The wheel flying at the camera looks like one of those terrible 3D Final Destination effects. And look at how perfectly it lands. That wheel was the functional side of Sliceserve's drive, which broke at some point, so the only motion left was the arm, which wasn't enough to keep it from getting counted out, giving Breakneck Nyan Nyan the win.
That's translation. Hey, he's moving. He's moving. That's valid translation.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I expected. The big wedge held up great, but unfortunately it looks like she hit the edges of it every time, which gave the spinner some engagement instead of just deflecting. The top plate is kind of astonishing because she cut straight through the TPU layer, but didn't break through the metal to hit anything inside, but the aluminum top plate was still badly bent. I want to hang this up on my wall because it's really cool. Like, look at the way it bent. It's kind of crazy. The servo came out, but it still works perfectly fine, and it actually kind of just unplugged. Sliceserve's wheel was cut perfectly with the wedge shape removed, and the other wheel looked like this. Here's a chunk taken out, and then the backside had this slice removed where you can see the hole that the screw should have tightened down the top plate in. The spinner missed all of the cone forks and instead cut through the mount right below the screw. Speaking of screws, several of them were badly cut or bent, and one screw got its head cut off while the rest is still stuck in Sliceserve's chassis. Also, this slice right here is where the battery was, so that fight could have gone a lot worse. I think it's time to retire this chassis. Well, that's it. Slicepost 31 was a fun idea, and it was definitely really entertaining, but I have a feeling it'll never see the light of day again. It ended up being a terrible version of the power of friendship, so if it ever does come back, maybe I'll call it the benefits of having only one robot. Amazingly though, the chassis of Outpost 31 only took this small amount of damage from Breakneck Nyan Nyan the entire event. I've actually run this exact same chassis again multiple times. Thank you for watching this event recap, and maybe I should take this dart out of my head now.
2, 3.